Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Protomartyr album, Ultimate Success Today. Protomartyr are a Detroit-based post-punk band who, in their early days, I was a little iffy on their debut, No Passion, All Technique. I thought that the title of this album kind of rang a little bit too true for me. I liked its very noisy nature. I liked the energy that the band was putting forward, but I felt like the songwriting and the performances were a little lackluster. But no, for me, in 2014, with Undercover Official Right, Protomartyr started to come out into their own. This was a much more noisy, almost gothic-based post-punk album. But the tracks were also much catchier, and I felt like Protomartyr had so much more of a personality here. However, ever since, Protomartyr have been kind of growing with each release. The Agent Intellect had them writing their catchiest tracks to date. This was a very evil, very tortured album as well. It was also deeply depressive though, and their personality was more than ever on display. And honestly, while I thought that this was going to be the sound of Protomartyr, they haven't stopped yet. Their next album, Relatives in Descent, was their biggest, their bulkiest, their darkest, their most impressive, and yet their catchiest album to date. Also had a lot of artsy tracks on there too. There's been seemingly no stopping them. Even their 2018 Consolation EP showed them going back to their noisy roots, but bringing up some really artsy themes and some really great lyrics, and really showed them just going into the future with really no fear at all. Now, from the sound of these singles, Protomartyr are pushing out their artsiest stuff to date. They've added some woodwind instruments. They have gone full art punk on us. Let's chat about this new thing. This album starts off with Day Without End. It's a really great, very tense intro that actually does a lot for me, for psyching me up for the rest of the album. Now, Joe Casey is genuinely one of my favorite voices in post-punk right now, and I do mean voices. I mean when his vocals hit the right way, they sound like they're coming from like inside your skull. But this track has some really great artsy twists to it. Like I said, Protomartyr brought in some woodwind instruments, which is just so obvious, but I never would have thought of it. But it works so well. I love Joe's performance here in the repeated mantra of Ultimate Success Today. I mean, it's not as explosive or memorable as anything that they've done, like to start off their last two albums, but man, it really gets me psyched up. Now for me, Processed by the Boys, it's my favorite track here by far. And you know what? That might be because it is the most chaotic and dark and straightforward track here. It brings me back to a simpler time, but it does all of that while also progressing the band in a nice way. The wailing guitars, the tortured vocals, and the woodwind instruments that are just always just seemingly just out of reach. It's just as gritty and painfully real as their last few albums. There's also some tongue-in-cheek social commentary on this track that I didn't expect, but actually comes off pretty well. By the time we get to I Am You Now, let me just get this off the table. Honestly, every track on here is just about as tense as the last. Not to mention, I love when Joe gets into this vocal mode here. Literally, he gets so commanding and intense, and he sounds like he's screaming right at you. I love it. I mean, talk about a friggin' presence. Now, instrumentally, this is one of the softer tunes here. That being said, the incredibly wordy performances that we get here and the twists and turns along the way make this track overall one that demands numerous listens, but I think the rewards are there. As a matter of fact, this album overall might be Protomartyr's most challenging release to date, but I do think the rewards are huge. It's just a very noisy, complex, but thought-provoking album. I love how dreamy the Aphorist is. But don't doze off because Joe Casey's very commanding performances continue to be dazzling. Now, this track does bring up one slight that I have with the album. It's actually not a slight by me, but I feel like it might be for others. This, as far as a catchy album goes, is certainly not that. This is actually easily one of the most hard to digest albums Protomartyr have put out. Protomartyr do challenge you with this album. There are times though where I feel like this album may be a little too complex, like on June 21st. This track to me was probably the biggest disappointment here. I've been dying to hear them work more with Kelly Deal because I know she's joined the touring band, and here she does just that. She lends a lot of vocals to this track, but honestly I think it's not really living up to my expectations. I do like the very tense instrumental, but compared to other tracks on on here, this is sort of tame. And Bridge and Crown for me is my least favorite track here. It's easily the gloomiest track here, very somber sounding. But for me, this is a sound that they've done so much better in the past. Hell, they've done so much better here. I mean, I still do like elements of it. That very noisy, chattering guitar that kind of pops in on each verse is actually pretty exciting. And I do like when it gets a little bit bulkier towards the end, but overall, this track doesn't progress nearly as much as the rest of the album. But outside of that, this may be a very challenging post-punk album, I think at least, but I think it's very rewarding. I love everything about Michigan Hammers. It's chaotic and it's messy and pretty hard to process. I mean, there is a lot going on here, but it's really exciting and genuinely like the culmination of everything that Protomartyr's been working with the last couple of years. And the very tense verses followed up with this very fluttering chorus is actually a really great tension and release experiment. On Tranquilizer, I love the bulkiness to this track, and I love how prominent the woodwind section is. This is certainly a really odd track. I mean, Joe here sounds desperately trying to keep up with the rest of the instrumentals and not doing so well, but it's actually done in a really exciting way. Not to mention when everything culminates for this big, noisy, chaotic chorus, everything is worth it. But it's a great, meditative, hypnotic track, and by the end of it, Joe just becomes completely obsessed with this track. It is awesome. And if you're a fan of their last two albums, Relatives in Descent and The Age and Intellect, definitely check out Modern Business Hymns. I think that this is just a really standard, great Protomartyr track. This may be my favorite deep cut here. As far as just a straightforward and genuinely easy to take in post-punk tune, it's easily the best one of those here. It's chaotic and it's off the rails, but it's also strangely triumphant and easily one of the catchiest tracks here. But as far as lyrics and performances go, it's definitely just as challenging and just as rewarding. Now, I have a lot of feelings towards Worm in Heaven as a finale. When this first dropped as a single, I was actually very disappointed with it. Now, personally, I wanted like a big, climactic, brooding finale. I really did. And while I am let down by that, I think this is genuinely one of the more tragic and emotional tunes Protomartyr I've ever written. It's grown on me a little bit. I still don't think it's as punchy as I'd like it to be, but it's a solid finale. So overall, this is a very challenging album, even for Protomartyr fans. It's not as noisy and as brooding and as twisted and intense as their last few albums. But Protomartyr's sound on this album, while challenging, is incredibly rewarding. And you know what? You have to give them credit. They're keeping their sound fresh. They're keeping the sound of post-punk fresh right now. And while this doesn't hit me as hard as their last two albums, it's still another very intense and very fresh sounding post-punk album right now. And I can't say that about a lot of it these days. I'm feeling a light 8 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.